Hey everyone, and welcome to the Data.World Fall Summit. We are so excited that you're joining us today. I would love to say that to each and every one of you, but there's a pretty big crowd joining us today, and that would take most of the time. And I know that's not what you signed up for. So on behalf of Data.World, I would like to say thank you for spending a part of your day with us and some of the most mind-blowing, intelligent speakers in data, analytics, and technology. Before we jump into the event, I gotta take care of some housekeeping stuff so we can keep today seamless and enjoyable. So first things first, we highly encourage you to join our Slack community and take part in the conversation during the event today. You can network, collaborate, and share your thoughts, all from the comfort of your keyboard. All you have to do is visit slack.data.world and join in there. Our community manager, Amber, has established some summit designated channels, and as soon as you join, she'll guide you to the right place. You should also see the pink button here on your screen. This right here will include all of your resources for today's summit. There you can find today's agenda, a help guide, and so much more. To answer the most frequently asked question, yes, all of today's sessions will be available on demand right after Summit concludes. Feel free to re-watch some of your favorite bits, share with your colleagues, or just watch on repeat whenever you want. No judgment here. I'll probably do that too. Now I know for a fact you did not register for this event to hear me talk the whole time. So I will wrap this up by saying thank you again for joining us today. Sit back, relax, and get ready to have your mind blown.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending our third summit. There are thousands of you here from around the world, and I couldn't be more proud to be leading Data.World as our CEO and co-founder alongside such an amazing team. This was a year of many milestones for us. This was a year that we got recognized for the second year in a row for being one of the most diverse companies in tech in Austin, which we're very proud of. This was also the year where we just had incredible growth. We beat all four of our financial planning scenarios during the pandemic, which we're still in the pandemic. And that's part of the reason why I am recording this from my home office and proudly sporting the pandemic shirt for Data.World. This came out in 2020. We thought this was going to be pretty short-lived, but no. So this shirt really, to me, typifies what the pandemic has been all about. Of course, mask up, wearing the shorts, the kids screaming in the background. As I reflect on the past year and a half, and I think about how we've grown with our customers, one of the first that pops into my mind is a big service firm that we work with. And they started out with just several dozen people on Data.World just 2 years ago. And the pandemic really accelerated their usage of our platform, where now there are over 16,000 of their people, over half of their firm on Data.World, collaborating on really important topics to help their customers navigate this pandemic, which is really the most challenging time for a lot of businesses since the Great Recession. The amount of agility you've needed to have to get that corporate brain really working, that's the way I personally think about data. I think about it as almost the nervous system for your company. Your information, your knowledge about all of your customers, your competition, your locations, your employees, your suppliers, your partners, all of that really defines the brain that you have in the company and the nervous system of all the departments working together to really become a very competitive business. One of my favorite examples, which is actually not a Data.World customer, is Airbnb. During the pandemic, their business was incredibly disrupted. And you know who their fifth employee was? It was a data scientist. back when they were such a young company, and they built their own data catalog. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into it. We've had Jeff Feng on our very popular podcast, Catalog and Cocktails. He was the guy that actually led the team to build that. And over 50% of Airbnb's employees use their internally built data catalog. And you know what? That led to them being very resilient during this pandemic. It led to them not only surviving, but frankly, thriving, pulling off an incredible IPO and growing to great heights. And they continue to do so and continue to make the news. And it's because their brain and their nervous system is so functional as a business because they put data at the center of their business since the beginning of the company. And that's what we're really focused on doing, not just for our enterprise customers, but frankly, for the world, for all of the people who have had siloed data, where we can solve some of the biggest problems in the world, whether that's cancer or climate change or COVID-19 or poverty or nutrition. There are so many important aspects of challenges that we need to solve by being data-driven. And we need to do that in our companies as well. I really want to thank you so much again for being here. We pride ourselves on how much our customers and the community adopts our solution. We pride ourselves on getting the ROI up for all of the investments you've made in your data infrastructure, across data mesh and data fabric. We are that glue that ties all of this together and increases the ROI and usability and adoption of all of those investments that you've made. And you're going to hear a lot about that today. Please make sure to check out the press releases we put out on our latest new features in the product. We've come out with over 1,000 releases of our product just in the past 12 months. And we are always innovating based on input from our community as well as all of our enterprise customers. Enjoy the day. I know that we're still all at home, working from home here, but hey, this has allowed us to come together to talk about really important topics in the data world, and let's build amazing businesses together. Thank you so much again for being here. And if anybody ever needs to reach me, my personal email is brett@data.world. That does not go through an assistant. That goes directly to me, and I would love to hear from you. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Hey, I'm Juan Takeda, principal scientist here at Data.World and co-host of Cataloging Cocktails, the honest, no BS, non-salesy podcast about data. I'm very excited to introduce our next keynote speaker, my friend Shamak Degani. Data mesh isn't a fuzzy pie-in-the-sky concept. It's becoming more relevant each day as organizations seek to become data-driven. Let's hear from Shamak, the person who coined the term data mesh, on what it really is, how to do it, and why you should do it too. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Let's talk about data mesh, what it is, and most importantly, how it will affect you and what you do and your day-to-day job. My name is Shamak Degani. I am the emerging tech director at ThoughtWorks and the founder of the concept of data mesh. I put a link here for you to get free access to the pre-release of my book on data mesh. And there's another book coming out, Architecture, the Hard Parts, to tell us that there are no silver bullets or right answers. There are only trade-offs. With that, let's get started. What is data mesh? Data mesh is a decentralized approach in managing and accessing analytical data or data for analytical use cases at scale. And I've threw in a funny word here, socio-technical approach. It's an approach that's about technology. It's about architecture, how we design our systems so that they can share data at scale. But it's also an approach that affects the life of people who manage that data and use the data, changes the organizational structure and organizational culture. You might be asking, what is analytical data? So, there is a large spectrum of different kinds of data, how we use the data, but there is a portion of data or the mode of access to the data that is there to satisfy the job of data scientists and data analysts and a few people in between those roles, right? The world is never binary. And the purpose of that data is to reflect the reality of what's happening in the business so that we can use that data to train machine learning models. We can use that data to make predictions, to look at the reports, generate reports, visualizations, analytics, and metrics. And why we want to do that? Because we are going into an era that digitalization of our business requires a different modes of automation. Up to this point, or up to prior to, I guess, machine learning become so prevalent in our industry, we were writing programs, we were writing rules, we were writing algorithms, and that's changing. That's changing to creation of models that gets trained based on the data that has been generated, based on the past observations. And based on that, then we can make predictions. We can build these machine learning models, essentially black box, and they learn to find patterns. So they do either statistical analysis, predictive analysis, look at the past, or making predictions about the future. Or the data that's really fueling the reports, the trend analysis that we're doing. The nature of analytical data is that it's temporal. We're always looking at a large volume of data across across history, in fact, infinite length of time since the events have happened. It should really reflect the business as closely as possible. So it's not some perfectly modeled and modified and mutated data. It should really reflect the reality of the business. It's ubiquitous, it can come from anywhere, and it obviously has a large scale. Data mesh attempts to solve the problem of scale. And you might be asking, well, we've been at this for a while, with a couple of decades, we've solved the problem of volume of scale, a scale of the volume of the data. We went to web, we generated a bunch of data interacting with our digital, interfaces and applications. So yes, we did solve that problem. We have distributed file systems, have produced some parallel processing of large volume of the data. And then, we got to experience, digital services that were generating different kinds of data. So we addressed the scale of variety of the data. We didn't have just perfectly modeled, tabular data. We had text and unstructured data and images, and that led to creation of object stores and solutions that dealt with diversity of the type of the data. And we went to we went from our screens to our devices and interacting majority of our time with our mobile phones, and that generated this large velocity of streams coming to our organizations, and we had to build a bunch of new solutions to manage that. And the Kafkas of the world, or the concept of stream processing came to exist. So what is left for data mesh to address? What is left is really the scale of complexity we deal with, the scale of our ambition. So we've moved on from a few statistical models embedded into, loan approval or a few bunch of businesses, to really trying to embed intelligence in everything we do, in every product we build. And the data that comes to us is not just from the data that our business unit generates. It's actually the data that every touch point with every customer generates. Not only that, the data that comes from beyond the bounds of and borders of our organization, our partners, are data that partners are generating, or the industry, or at the global scale we're generating. So how do we manage this complexity? And well, up to now, we've had an architecture like this. We had, databases that runs the business, and then we had a bunch of ETL jobs or data virtualization or other solutions on top of that to get the data out, dump it into the lake or the warehouse. And then here you go. We have some data that, downstream we can use, and then the central, somewhat a central governance on top of it to make sure this data is compliant and secure. And you might asking, so what is wrong with this? We've had this for decades. Well, let me tell you a little bit of a story. And as Joseph Campbell says, everything starts with a story. The stories start with these failure symptoms that we started seeing at scale with our clients. People who were struggling to kind of onboard new types of data for analytical use cases. They were struggling to meet those ambitious goals and strategic initiatives they had to become data-driven. They were just bootstrapping from one platform to the next, and this throw more tech at it. Let's go to the cloud and just more and more investment, but yet we're struggling to see results. And if you look at the kind of the ratio of the money we're spending for AI and data in enterprises from this New Vantage Partner reports, it's evident that we're not getting results proportionally to the amount of money we're spending. So what is going on here? We've had, a ton of innovation. We've had the warehouse and the lake house and the data lake and the lake house and all of that on the cloud. Is this something fundamental that we need to challenge? And what Data Mesh is attempting to do? It's attempting to challenge fundamentally this assumption that data needs to be centralized. It needs to be organizationally managed by the CDO, CDAO, or Department of Data. And for that, big job that they have, the technology is also encouraging centralization of put it in the lake or put it in the warehouse. Yes, you can divide it into nice tables or nice files or directories, but at the end of the day, from the technology perspective, we're also expected that data will be under the ruling of a technology that can get everything in one place from all of these ubiquitous sources to all of these use cases that fuel our innovation agenda. And Data Mesh starts to just fundamentally challenge this and change this approach. So basically, if we assume that dots in the middle is an assumption that where we are in our industry at this point in time, the complexity of the business is a default position, the data sources is only increasing, their aspirations how to use data and embed intelligence in every function that we do is not going to slow down. What do we need to do that we can still get value from our data? We can still be kind of rapid in responding to change. What change upstream doesn't break all those labyrinths of pipelines, and then downstream, the users are kind of throwing their arms in the air because they don't even know what went on. It's just so far removed from them. So how can we immune to change? So yes, I know these are very big promises, and for the rest of this talk, I will try to both unpack the layers of change that needs to happen, both from architecture, but also how, as individuals, that we play a part in this ecosystem, we need to change our own biases. We need to imagine a different future in how we work. So 4 fundamental principles that guides kind of implementation of every Data Mesh kind of instance. And these 4 principles are, first and foremost, around a new way of decoupling this hairy problem of data, around kind of ownership of the data back to the domains, to the people who most understand the data and are most suitable to kind of manage that data. Rethinking data as a product, so it's something to share, not something to hoard and collect. Imagining new kind of infrastructure that allows kind of sharing of a data at multi-organizational scale, and a model of governance that actually can work, right, in a distributed model. So what does data and domain-driven design mean? So in early 2000s, Eric Evans came up with this idea when he was faced, or a group of people were faced with complexity of software design. We were at a point of digitalization. Like, imagine what we were doing in 2003, right? We were building a ton of web applications. Every manual process was trying to kind of find a way of digitizing itself. So software industry was going through the same problem of kind of complexity of operations in the organization. So what did they think about was, well, the software design needs to reflect the business. We need to reflect the domain of the business. We can't have one software to rule them all, one model of digitization to rule them all. We can't have silos of models. We can't have no models. And you can just carry this conversation to the data world, right? You can't have a warehouse that models everything in it. You can't have a lake with no modeling, and you can't have silos of database applications that don't talk to each other. So he came up with a strategic design patterns around finding the bounded context of parts of your business, mapping the modeling of the data at that time, or software, to different parts, and using a ubiquitous language within it. I mean, this is a very, very thick subject, so I'm not going to do justice. But essentially, you can imagine this warehouse or lake that you had into physically independent kind of pieces of storage of the data and sharing of the data, and most importantly, ownership of the data. So if you're in a digital streaming business, you will have the people who are working on the player device that's playing music to your audience be responsible for all of these player events or player sessions or player, aggregates information, and they will share it directly, peer-to-peer, to the data scientists, data analysts for their use cases. Similarly, some aggregate domains. Maybe you want to kind of aggregate your listeners' behavior and profile and preferences, and you create a domain around that. Maybe you want to have recommendations based on social network behavior, and you will have a data and domain around that. So how your life will change if you're an application developer, if you're a product owner, if you're working in a domain right now, and maybe a technology domain aligned with your business. Maybe you're working on those player devices. Maybe you're working on the back office applications that deals with payment to the artist. You have a new responsibility. You have a responsibility to not only build the operational systems that run the business, but also share the data that gets generated and captured by running the business for analytical use cases with the rest of the business. You have an opportunity to play in a new area. And maybe there are new domains that requires formation of a new team, not because there is an application there, but because there's an opportunity to share data, to create data really as a product there. And most importantly, I think we have to stop having this bifurcation between intelligence and AI and data use case and then application. We've got to embed that into everything we do. So data-driven models and applications become a new norm, embedded into every application that we build, rather than an exception kind of to the size those data scientists in the data department will take care of it. And I know for many of you, you might have these pointy eyebrows and kind of frown on your face because you might say, I'm already overloaded with running my player applications and make sure it's up and running. And now you're telling me I have to do a bunch of new work. And bear with me, I'll hopefully turn in this like kind of angry eyebrows into some happy face by the end of this conversation. But reality is that if we don't change direction, we're just going to end up where we are heading, which is what I described earlier, all of those failure symptoms that we see across the board in our industry. So the kind of transformation that needs to happen in our thinking, data can be valuable, ready to use, beautifully shared, just at the point of creation. At that point of creation will be an application that's generating data, or it could, the domain, or it could be a new domain that we have created. We've got to stop thinking about the universe can be modeled as one. Really, there are many models, but they're interconnected models. There are many relevant sources of the data, and we sort of kind of thinking about, okay, I'm going to buy this new streaming service and this new lake house or new warehouse that's going to solve our problems. Start from the business and start from the domain, started from designing the data around that, and then, think about the technology. So if you did that, if you did have this domain ownership, we might end up in this scenario of data siloing, right? I only care about my play sessions and player events. Why should I care about, listeners, recommendation to listeners? Why should I care about sharing data? And that's where the second pillar comes to exist, to create some sort of a magic in between sharing data and product thinking. And what's a good product look like? A good product is usable, is valuable, is visible. If we went and apply those usability characteristics to data, what do we expect? Do we expect just a table of data or a file of JSON, kind of entities and objects that reflect the reality? Yes, we do, but we do a lot more than that. We do expect that whatever we're sharing, this new construct of the data as a product, in itself, intrinsically, must be discoverable. It must be understandable. It must be satisfying. The journey of a data scientist, the journey of a data analyst, someone who has a hypothesis to drive one of these data-driven decisions or data-driven models, to really satisfy their journey. And their journey often starts with a question that needs to lead to finding data. What data can I tap into to answer my question? When I find the data, can I understand it? Does it have computational documentation? Does it have a documentation that not only tells me, okay, these are the fields and what these fields mean, but it also has a running code inside of the documentation that show me, these are the statistical characteristics of my data. This is how I can use it. This is how I can query it. These are the expectations I can have. I can trust this data. Why I can trust it? Because most importantly, you see that blue person, there is a person, a data product owner assigned, whose job is to make sure this data is trustworthy. And what she's done is that she's shared a bunch of metrics with me. She's telling me how often the data is being updated. She's telling me, should I expect some missing information because it's real-time data, so there's not much of a consolidation is happening. And if not, maybe she's pointing me to a different data set, the different data product that has the characteristic, like timeliness characteristics, the quality characteristics that my use case requires. And I put a bunch of other characteristics there to make sure that we kind of like understand what a usable or data as a product mean. The one that I really want to highlight here is that the data and how it's shared, it really needs to meet the needs of those users using the native tools that they use today. I mean, these native tools change over time, right? Maybe I'm using MLflow, maybe I'm using Spark, maybe I'm using PyTorch, I don't know. There are all of these tools that I'm using as a data scientist, or maybe I just need a CSV file to do some spreadsheet analysis. So for all of those use cases, the data as a product should natively address the access model to the data. And this is what we're going to find ourselves into trouble, because for decades and decades we've been told that you've got to follow this tool that formats your data in this certain way and be slave to that tool, because that's how we've been very tool oriented. Now we need to become very human oriented and also kind of domain oriented as a first context. So if you are a data analyst and data scientist to this talk, hopefully this slide puts a smile on your face, because the friction in discovering data, in understanding it, in exploring it, hopefully will go away, and you will have a delightful experience, because the mesh, every data product has an intrinsic and inherent set of characteristics built into it, and people who are, most importantly, people who are responsible to make you happy as their first-class customer. And hopefully that changes the culture of, I don't trust the data until I go and do some lineage and investigative analysis. And you can trust the data by default, because there are guarantees that every data set is exposing in terms of, and it actively tries to meet and is being observed and being kind of automatically monitored to meet those guarantees. And with that delight of experience comes the responsibility that you need to play in the mesh, right? You as a data scientist, hopefully you get closer and closer to the domains, closer to the applications that share data with you, or using the data that you are generating, those higher order intelligent kind of information that you're generating. So we don't have this like bimodal of, those are the data people and we have the data scientists, and this is all of the stack for ML, and this is the stack for the data, and this is the stack for app. We really need to integrate this in a very, very different way, and that's what data mesh tries to do. So play in the mesh. If you're a product owner and you are managing the, let's say, the products of those player devices, there is new opportunity for you to become a data product owner. In fact, I'm really excited to see these new titles appearing on my LinkedIn feed of different people that are data product owners. So it's definitely happening, and really create some magic. We bring that kind of human-centric product thinking to the world of data, and how we can think about data as a product, and bring those disciplines, please, to the practice of data management. And you will have a new set of customers. Those are those first-class data users, like the data analysts and data scientists. And you will be evaluated based on a new set of criteria, based on the success of your data set. Not because how much terabytes of data you manage to share, but really based on what impact and what value that data generated, and how happy your customers are. If you're a data engineer today, right, you're building pipelines, and I have a lot of friends, dear friends, who are data engineers today. No more isolation. I'm building pipelines, to move data from these domains and applications, business domain, to these data warehouse or a lake, and that's kind of my job stuck in the middle, really isolated from where the action happens, where the data is being used in novel and wonderful places, and where the data is coming from. You will have a choice to go back and embed yourself into the domains where the action is happening, where those interesting decisions around, I don't know, social network-based recommendation systems or reinforcement learning of did we make a right recommendation to our customer who called, I don't know, on the call center, and she was grumpy. Did we give them a right offer? And so really you become embedded into solving those business problems with data and also sharing the data. And your responsibility is now end to end. With data as a product, we're not just saying, oh, this is the data, we just throw it over the wall in the warehouse or in the lake for somebody else to kind of come and use it. You are end to end responsible for the code that continues to manage and transform and share that data. You're responsible for the data itself. You're responsible for execution and adoption of the policies. You're responsible for security of the data. You're responsible for integrity of the data. You also have an opportunity to say, and I have a lot of data engineer friends who work in a data mesh kind of implementations, and they say, look, I'm not excited about maybe the business domain areas. I'm more excited about the platform, the domain agnostic platform that needs to support the people, and they may move kind of to the platform. So let's talk about the transformation that needs to happen. Really, we need to start thinking about data not as an asset, be mere asset, but as a product, not as a byproduct application we throw around, as one unit. Data and the code that maintains it. There's no separation of file on the disk and the pipelines that runs it, and maybe two separate teams deal with that. It's really come as one unit. Even though physically, maybe at the computation and on the storage level, they're different, but at the logical level, we're talking about a new kind of logical unit. So we've done the product thinking, so hopefully we won't have silos of the data, but at this point you were going, okay, this is a lot of new responsibilities for domain teams, and how can we empower them? And we can empower them with a sprinkle of platform thinking, right? And what does that look like? So the job of the platform is really reduce cognitive load of teams so they can focus on what matters and not the metal work that they have to do to actually do their real work. And if you think about that, the personas of the people that play in this ecosystem, we have the data product developer now, we have the data product owner, we have the data consumers, we have the data scientists, different types of users. What do these interfaces, these lollipops are kind of interfaces, these programmatic interfaces that we're providing to these users look like? Well, you might say, well, we have right now, I have, data warehouse, and I have data lake, and I have data workflow processing. Isn't that good enough? Well, that's great. That's a foundation we need to build on, but we need more than that. We need type of services that really removes a lot of cognitive load that data engineers and data scientists they have today dealing with data, to make it really, really, really simple to just focus on kind of the code that transforms the data or maintains the data and the data itself, and nothing else. The rest of the provision of the infrastructure, rest of kind of a lot of the complexity that exists need to be kind of abstracted by this data product experience plane, right? And then we need a kind of a mesh level or graph level intelligence so that we can extract and drive kind of knowledge graphs, and we can apply policies across, we can observe the mesh as a whole. So again, this is a deep topic. I'm just scratching the surface to give you a taste of what the platforms of future look like. But if you are a platform engineer, or you want to be a platform engineer, you have a kind of choice to stay in this area of domain agnostic platform capabilities and serve your new customers who are the data product owners, who are the data consumers. At the end of the day, you are building as a platform engineer a product, right, to make the life of those people who build other products on top, the data products on top, easier. And if I leave you with the one kind of change in how you make decisions, would be, how do you make decisions around vendors? Like, what vendor do I need to buy from? And because we're talking about building a very distributed ecosystem, please think carefully about your vendors to make sure that they provide open interfaces, open standards for interoperability. So if you're working with a vendor that works on sharing data, make sure that technology plays really well with another vendor that's perhaps providing discoverability of the data. So I think for a long time in our industry, we've been very gravitated very much into one solution to solve them all. And the solutions and vendors haven't been incentivized to open up and share the data. They've been incentivized to give me all of your data and I take care of it for you. With a distributed model, that just simply doesn't work. So that would be one change, I guess, in how you make decisions. So moving away from thinking about this platform as one big platform rather than these lollipops, right? Interfaces, protocols that allow interoperability of different solutions that we need to, to have those layers of kind of platform capabilities that we need to build. And most importantly, your customers should not necessarily be data specialists, that they know everything about every tool on the planet, and really remove some of those cognitive load that they might have to, well, I need to actually, debug what went to my cluster that was running this job, right? As opposed to, don't need to worry any of that. That's easily provided to me. I just need to worry about that little piece of transformation code that I wrote to generate a new sets of data, right? So really think about how we can upskill, cross-skill, and bring on board this large portion of our industry, data, like developers and technologies, to become data developers. And really think about experience. You're building experiences. You're not building a bunch of mechanical solutions, right? You're building new experiences for these kind of users. So we did that. We created the platform. The other problems arise, right? How do I make sure that these data products actually talk to each other? How do I make sure sharing of data across domains easily happen? How do I make sure my data is secure? So then the new mode of governance, automated federated governance, comes to play. And this mode of governance is really about embracing decentralization. It's still about achieving the same objectives, which is high quality data, high integrity data, high availability of data, secure and compliant data across the organization, getting the right data to the right person at the right time. But let's do it differently. Let's do it with accepting that change is inevitable, and we have a very dynamic topology. Let's accept that we have an access to automation. So I'm introducing a very very kind of high-level view of the operational model of the governance, which really relies on federation. So bring people from these domains to play in. So members of different domain product owners will be part of the governance. They need to have a stake. They need to have a global incentive around interoperability of the data, adoption of standardization, meeting the security requirements, and local incentives. I have more users for my data. Think about what actually needs to be globally standardized, what doesn't need to be globally standardized. And for those things, define your policies and automate them and embed automation and computation of those policies into your data product. Let's give an example. Let's say we came together and say, look, we've got to standardize how we articulate data quality. We may decide that, okay, we've been inspired by WC data quality vocabulary, and we want to standardize around that. So that would be your global policy. Then we work with the platform and say, we should kind of define these quality metrics and how they get emitted and how they get calculated into a set of APIs, a set of libraries that we can then use in every data product execution context and run it. So we have an agent that captures those metrics and shares those metrics, and data product developers make sure that those metrics are always in a standard way available, because they're using the technology or the library that provided by the platform. So our shape of governance really changes in a way that we move away from governance be the one who's responsible for quality or security, to the governance function is responsible for defining what constitutes security and quality and measuring it, but leaving it to the domains enabled by the platform to assure that the data is it has high quality. And the success metrics changes from having more data to actually driving value from data. So if you're a member of a data governance team, you need to make a choice. Are you going to be focusing on definition of the policies as an SME, or will you actually become a data product owner? So a lot of folks that have been traditionally data steward, they're moving to becoming a data product owner. You will have new friends. You're not going to be alone in the governance department trying to figure out how to get your arms around the data. You're actually working alongside with the data product owners, domain owners, and who are actually accountable for data availability and quality. So there are other people to really distribute this problem, right? Synchronization and this single job of governance need to be distributed, and less manual work and less perhaps control. So right now you're probably the one who stamps the golden data set and decides who can access, and that really changes because and that might be uncomfortable because we are relying on automation for making sure the policy, access control policies are enforced, and hopefully less work for you. So if I leave you with one thing, I leave you with this quote from Immanuel Kant, that we need to start to see the bigger picture. We need to see the whole, and then how this data mesh and our role fits within that whole. The whole is about this connected cycle of intelligence, and I've CC'd and put an article from ThoughtWorks that defines it much better than I do, that the world evolves within, actions and interactions we have with each other and with our users, that generates data as a product from where we created our insights through reports or automated decisions based on our ML models. So it's all about this mesh of interconnected kind of sharing of data with people responsible and as close to the data as possible, enabled by a platform. Thank you so much for listening to me.